All right, we're going to get started. All right. Okay, welcome. Okay, everybody. NFPA 110 and 111 first draft meetings are finally completed. And I just want to give you a report out on what happened over the last 2 days. So we're completely done with we had 57 public inputs per my count. 57 public inputs. We went for a little over 12 hours, but we'll call it 12 hours. So that was 2 hours and 37 minutes per public input. You heard that right. So, all right. So what I want to do is, so 57 public inputs, we know that, and I'm going to tally up. I just went through my documents, and I'm going to walk down through 110 first, and then 111, and we'll come up with what I think is the number of first revisions. Obviously, proof's going to be in the pudding, so to speak, whenever we get done. So whenever NFPA gets done with all of their stuff, that will determine the final count. So this is the meeting just ended a little bit ago, about an hour ago, actually. Man, it was a long 2 days. But in any case, first off, I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody. Off of NFPA, off of the committee, 110, 111 committee. I'm not speaking on behalf of IEI or even Eaton. It's all coming from me, and I'm just telling you what happened this week. That's all. So that's all I'm doing. All right, this last 2 days. Okay, so first things first. I already said, now total, when I say 57 public inputs, that is including NFPA 110 and 111. I haven't separated out how many public inputs were 110. I'd say a majority of them were in 110. 111 had about, I don't know, maybe 16 or 17, something like that, public inputs. But I'm just telling you, total is 57. All right, so let's start with 110. First things first, public inputs 22 and 23. I'm going to record these down too. So PIs 22 and 23, I believe, were bucketed together. And when we say bucketed together, that means that both of those public inputs made similar suggestions, and then we lumped them together because we felt that the committee's first revision met the needs or met the desires of the submitter. So 1.1.3 added, remember 1.1.3 talks about what 110 does not cover. And remember what the title of 110 is. Title of 110, and I want to make sure I read it so it's right. Standard for emergency and standby power systems. Now, I told you in yesterday's session that we had a lot of debate on, do we keep standby power systems? And I'll tell you, I'm going to read what our panel statement was for one of the annex materials, because I think we nailed why we had to keep standby power systems in there. So, and when we get to the annex material a little bit later, I'll read you why. So public inputs 22 and 23 added optional standby systems as something that this standard 110 does not cover, because optional standby systems are not emergency standby systems. Now they are a standby power system. I'm going to go straight to that. I'm going to go straight to that panel statement, and that would have been, I don't know what, let's see, 110. Close. This would have been explanatory material, and I just got to find, yes, here it is. So we made a first revision in Annex Material 4.1, which he didn't capture. 4.1. Annex Material 4.1. Let's take a look at it. So Annex Material, what we did in 4.1 was we said, now remember this, the Annex Material is not enforceable. It is, hey, Ben, good to see you online. I'm not seeing you, but thanks for joining me. You're probably the only one out there, but that's okay. I just want to get this recorded. So this in the Annex Material, we noted that the standard provides the performance requirements because, remember, if you look at the scope of 110, this is all about performance requirements. It doesn't tell you what you need to provide. It tells you the performance capabilities of what needs to be provided. And we had that discussion. We resolved a lot of the energy management systems, and we resolved the public inputs that spoke to microgrids. And the reason we did that was because, A, it wasn't the right areas where they were making the public inputs, but what struck me was that if we're going to put something in 110 to address microgrids, it probably should be speaking to what are the performance expectations of the microgrid that we need to include. So that's to the side. So the standard provides the performance requirements for the emergency power supply system as a complete functioning system. Now this covers the classes, the levels, and the types. The standard is not a recommendation for, which one's most suitable for any given application. Now, the next thing we did was we separated out. So in the title, it says standard for emergency and standby power systems. So the existing annex material is all screwed up. I mean, they had alternate power systems. So you got to read the existing annex material A4.1 and you'll go, hey, Nihad. So anyway, we broke out, what do we mean by emergency power supply system? And then what do we mean by standby power supply system? So we wrote two paragraphs. One is the term emergency power supply system is the focus of the standard because that's what the title says. And includes such systems as those found in NFPA 70, Article 700, Article 701, and Article 708. So 700 is emergency, 701 is legally required standby systems, and 708 is critical operation power systems. So all of those fit under the envelope of 110. So do the emergency systems that are in NFPA 99 and 517, because those are healthcare, but not all of healthcare, right? So the standard for emergency and standby, so the emergency power supply system, the EPSS, is really looking at 700 systems, 701. We probably should have said and similar, but this is just annex material. Gives you some information. Now the second paragraph that we added, the term standby power supply system establishes the connection that may occur, it's not always going to be all the time, but may occur in some systems, for example, where the generator supplies both emergency power system and optional standby systems, because we can, in some cases, have non-emergency loads on that generator. But what do we have to do? We have to shed those loads whenever we go to the emergency. If there's an emergency, we can't have the optional standby system. So there's other little transfer switches that are required in the system. So by keeping standby power systems in the title, it establishes that connection with the balance of system on whenever you have the overlap, when they're interconnected in that way. So that's sort of what we did in the annex material, and that helps you understand why we did not accept removing standby from the title, making it from standard for emergency and standby power systems to standard for emergency power systems. And so when you look at the public inputs, that's at least where my head was at, and I heard that echoed, and we all agreed on the language in this annex material. So that was unanimous. So that is that gives you an understanding of what we mean by standby power systems. That may clear up some confusion. So that would be public input 37. So PI 37, that's another first revision in Annex 4.1. All right, so let's go back to the top. So we have those two optional, and then public input 29. So we move always from chapter 1, we skip chapter 2, nothing in chapter 2, we move into definitions in chapter 3. PI 29 generated a PI 29 generated another first level first revision, which is adding the definition of nickel cadmium battery NICD. And it's a secondary cell in which the active material of the positive electrode is nickel oxyhydroxide. Ooh. The active material of the negative electrode is cadmium, and the electrolyte is dilute potassium hydroxide. So we use the term in 110, so we added that definition. So that is PI 29. So we're at, I'm just going to tally these up. These are all, so there's 1, 2, 3 first revisions. Right, yep. And then the next one is a PI 28. It's another definition of optional standby system, because we added that, we added optional standby system in the in 1.1.3, which says the standard doesn't cover the optional standby system. So we had to add it. We didn't have to, but we did. We added an optional standby system definition, which we extracted from Article 100 of the National Electrical Code. So that would be first revision number 4. Then we went to 3.3.14.2 for bypass isolation switch. Now, there's actually, in my opinion, a mistake. So we were going to extract the definition of the bypass isolation switch from the 2023 version of the National Electrical Code. But in my humble opinion, the 2023 version of the National Electrical Code got it wrong. And I'll tell you why. Here is why. If you look at, I'm just going to bring up TerraView, what the submitter of this public input wanted to add the word transfer in front of switch. So they wanted to define bypass isolation transfer switch. But if you look at the actual language of the code of 110, we don't use the word bypass isolation transfer switch. We use the word bypass isolation switch. So if we would have defined bypass isolation transfer switch, it's not used in 110. So we couldn't accept it. So, and then I went back and because I saw it was extracted text from the National Electrical Code. And I go to the NEC, and if you scroll down to bypass isolation, I think you got to go all the way down to transfer switch. The way they laid it out. And I can't search TerraView. So you got to scroll all the way down to the T's. QRS T, transfer switch. All right, transfer switch, bypass as isolation. Now, here's the problem. If you go back to Article 700 and you go to the emergency system and you go down to transfer equipment 700.5, 700.5b does have, and they added the word transfer switches. So they added bypass isolation transfer switches. And it says a means will be permitted to bypass the ice and isolate the transfer equipment where bypass isolation transfer switches are used, blah, blah, blah. So that's not bad. I was looking at the previous version. So they did add the word transfer in there. So that's a good thing. But when the submitter of this said to pull the definition, they didn't add transfers throughout the code so that the term is actually used. And the problem with actually adding that in 110, it's not as simple as just adding the word transfer, because they didn't even do that in the code. They actually made a lot of changes to accommodate adding that word. We would have had to have made those changes in 110 to accommodate the bypass isolation transfer switch, right? So defining bypass isolation switch, and in my opinion, there needs to be a definition in the National Electrical Code for a bypass isolation switch. I'd have to find where I know it's used, where we just say bypass isolation switch. And they may have actually removed it. I don't see it. I'd have to do some searching to find and make sure that it's not in there anywhere. And they may have spent more time in the National Electrical Code to address that, but we didn't spend that time in 110, and we didn't get public inputs to fix that. So what we did was we made a first revision, and we said we kept bypass isolation switch as the term, because that's the term that's used. But we made a change to the definition. What we point out in the definition, a couple things. A bypass isolation switch can be manual, a non-automatic, or automatic. Now the question is, what's the difference between manual and non-automatic? Manual means I'm physically touching something and I'm causing the transfer. Non-automatic means I'm doing it, I could be doing it remotely via a push button, but I got to press a button to make that happen. I'm not physically making the transition. I am pressing a button. That's the difference between manual and non-automatic. And then automatic. Now, so what that simple change does, it aligns with the changes that they made in the National Electrical Code, but it recognizes that there are technologies on the market where it can be a manual, non-automatic, or automatic bypass isolation. Now, the next thing that we did in the definition was we recognized there's two features or two functions of a bypass isolation switch. What are those two functions? One, bypass. Two, isolate. So what we said that this device that's used in conjunction with a transfer switch, okay, and if you look at the standard 1008, this definition is right out of there. It is always, these are used in combination with a transfer switch, which is why the National Electrical Code said bypass isolation transfer switch. So, and we said that it's a transfer switch to provide a means of directly connecting load conductors to a power source, which would be bypassing, right, bypassing the transfer switch. And then it also says, and allows the transfer switch to be isolated or disconnected. So we picked up both of those aspects, bypass and isolation, and also manual, non-automatic, or automatic. So that little change, that was a nice hefty discussion, but I love where we came out with it. I think it makes 100% sense. And I think that will actually, it would be great to see that term added to the National Electrical Code as long as we use the term. If we don't use the term bypass isolation switch, then you don't need it over there. But I would love to see the definition in the code of a bypass isolation transfer switch to include the concepts of bypass and isolation in the definition. All right, so that's one thing that we did. Or two things that we did. I don't know. That's the definition. So that would be PI, I think that's PI 12. PI 12, PI 28 must have been before that. Yep. So that's PI 12. So I do that. It's PI 12. That is first revision number 5. Now the next one is in chapter 4. So we go from chapter 3 to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is classification of emergency power supply systems. Classification. So the first change is right off the bat in 4.1. 4.1 is general. The EPSS shall provide a source of electrical power of required capacity, reliability, and quality to loads for a length of time as specified in this table, right? So they have a table. Actually, 4.1a is the time, and then 4.1b is says that within a specified time following loss or failure of the normal power supply. So the way 4.1 is laid out is if you lose power, 4.1a tells you, based upon the class, the minimum time, length of time that the power that this energy power EPSS has to be able to supply power for. So, for example, class 6 is 6 hours. So if you have a class 6 EPSS, then it has to provide power for 6 hours. Class 2 is 2 hours. Class 48, 48 hours. All right, now, what's in table 4.1.b, it says within a specified time following loss of failure of the normal power supply. So 4.1b gives us how much time what's the time that we want it to transfer and get everything back up and running. So if you have a type U, basically an uninterruptible power supply system, so that's a UPS. A type 10 is 10 seconds, so you got 10 seconds. Type 60 is 60 seconds. What we added was a type X, as an X-ray. Other time in seconds as required by the application, code, or user. So that's a pretty generic perspective. And one of the reasons why they said they needed that was because specifications will drive a different time that might not be in that table, but might be applicable for the application, and this gives that flexibility. So that's sort of what we did there. And that is PI 17. Why did I say 12? All right, look, did I write? Okay, PI 12, PI 17 is the next one. PI 17. So PI 17 drove another one, which is first revision number 6. Now, I don't know if that's the actual number, but that's the sequence that we're in. All right, so next one. We're in chapter 5 now, energy sources. A lot of discussion on this one. So, PI 14 generated first revision number 7. Now this is in 5.2.3, energy converter design and testing. So this is an energy converter for a level 1 system. It says it has to be specifically designed, assembled, and tested to ensure intended system operation under a list of conditions, and there's 7 of them. The first one is short circuits. Now we know typically when we're dealing with short circuits, what are we thinking about? We're thinking about interrupting capabilities, and we're thinking about withstand capabilities. Now in this case here, short circuits, they want this, the energy converter, the level 1 system, has to be designed and tested for phase to ground faults, phase to phase faults, or phase to neutral. Now, the reason we did the phase to neutral was because they said some of these are ungrounded. And we can discuss that. I argued against removing phase to ground. They wanted to remove phase to ground and just add phase to neutral. And in my opinion, we needed it. Hey, Ben Straley, that just makes it match the same thing in table A. I'm not sure which one you're speaking to. Oh, yeah, it does. You're right. Table A is other time in hours as required by the application code or user. You're right. It does. Table 4.1a and 4.1b, now there's a type X. Great. You are the man. Yes, Ben, you're absolutely right. And it provides some flexibility for them. All right, so energy sources, what they did was they added or phase to neutral as applicable. In my opinion, It's okay. It's all good, right? So I argued against getting rid of the phase to ground test because, I mean, that's the most common fault in the power distribution system. It's a ground fault. So, yeah, you're right. I got you. 4.1, Ben, you're right. All right, so, and there is a little delay, so sorry about that. That's why I'm moving on. Not that I'm ignoring you, I just looked up. So PI 14 is another first revision that's on 5.2.3. Now, PI 15 is another first revision. We're up to 8 now, and this moves down to fuel tank capacity. So now we're into how much fuel you got in the ground, right? So 5.5.3, we separated 5.5.3 into two sections, 5.5.3.1 and 5.5.3.2. 5.531 is for classifications 24 hours or less. So that's as specified in 4.1a. What that tells us is the main fuel tank has to have a minimum capacity of 133% of either the low fuel sensor quantity specified. Oh, I never fixed that. I wanted to go back. It says of either the low fuel sensor quantity specified. What it should have said is without the word either, but I don't think we took that out. So, and then we have a dot 2 that says for classifications greater than 24 hours, the main fuel tank shall have a minimum capacity of at least 100% of the low fuel sensor quantity specified in 552. So we separated it into 24 hours and less, here's how much fuel you have to have, and greater than 24 hours, here's how much fuel you have to have. Separated that both out for 5.5.3, and that was PI 15, the 8th FR. All right, so scroll on down. We got another one. Oh, wrong mouse. PI. Oh, this was a committee public input. So I'm going to call this a PCOM. PCOM 1 is the 9th first revision. What we did here was where it says type of battery in 5.6.4.5. Type of battery. The battery has to be of nickel cadmium. And then we did a comma, said lead acid type, and we recognized other battery technologies, nickel zinc, lithium ion, or other stored energy technologies capable of providing sufficient established prime mover crank cycles. Just have to call you in a few. So call you in a few. Live right now. All right, so that was 5.6.4.5. That was battery types of batteries. We added different types of batteries in that list, and that was a committee change. Public input. It's not a committee input. It's not a public input. It's a committee input. We'll call that a CI, Committee Input 1. All right, and that was first revision, 9 first revisions. All right, so now we're moving into 5.6, control functions. We're at 5.6.5.1 now. A control panel shall be provided, or actually, nope, 5.6.5.2. I got to delete 5.6.5.1. So we're in 5.6.5.2. Sorry. We added, so this is when we say if you have a control panel and it's provided in accordance with 5.6.5.1, and I just deleted that. What is it? 5.6.5.1 is it shall be provided. So it tells you what you need to contain. And prior to this edition, it only had 6 things. We added a 7th. Other conditions as required by the manufacturer of the prime mover. So the concern of the committee was, and this was driven off of PI 7, so we're on 10 first revisions. PI 7 said they wanted to add this language, so we added a 7th option, other conditions as required by the manufacturer of the prime mover. So there might be there might be special needs from the prime mover's perspective, and they wanted to be encompassing, because right now it just ran down through a list, and it had to be shall contain the following: automatic road. There wasn't anything else to recognize the manufacturer of the prime mover's requirements that might be there, so we just added that. I don't think it's a big deal, but it was for someone. So, and then we move into 5.6.5.4. Delete that. And we're at PI 3, public input 3. So this is first revision number 11. Automatic control. So this is 5.6.5.4. We added in 5.6.5.4.3, where it says controls to shut down and lock out the prime mover under any of the following conditions. So what's the parent text? Automatic control and safety panel has to be part of the EPS, containing the following equipment, and has to have characteristics. And there's 1, 2, 3 things. You have the crank control equipment, you have the panel mounted control switches, and number 3 is your controls to shut down and lock out the prime mover. We said the high engine temperature, as indicated by high engine coolant temperature, high lube oil temperature, or both. So you have to have a high engine temperature, any of the following conditions when you have high engine temperature as indicated by the coolant temperature or high lube oil temperature, or both of those. So they wanted to add the coolant in there, and really the high lube oil temperature. Engine coolant temperature was just a clarification for the existing language. So that's what we did in 5.6.5.4. And that was PI number 3. All right, so PI 16. This would be the 12th first revision. Is in 5.6.5.9. Read all of that. And we started with a 5.6. So level 1 systems have to comply with all of the following. So what we did was we took language out of 700 in regard to the integrity of the start signal. So there were things that were put in the National Electrical Code. Now here was the debate on this one. It's a new section, so that's why it's a 5659. Here was the debate. We wanted the existing language, and we didn't want to modify what Article 700 did for the integrity of the EPS start signal circuit. But the way that there's 2 different style manuals. Remember, the NFPA 110 doesn't follow the NEC style manual. It follows the regulations that govern the development of technical documents. Can't remember the exact title of the document. But so, and what that document requires is that each of these sections can only have one requirement. So the paragraph that was coming out of the National Electrical Code said the integrity of the EPS signal has from a remote device, such as an automatic transfer switch or paralleling control, it has to be monitored for broken or disconnected or shorted wires. So you want to make sure that if you have a wire between, say, a button and the prime mover, you want to make sure that if there's a problem in that wiring, that you detect that. So that's the first requirement. So it says it has to monitor that control wire for broken or disconnected or shorted wires. And the second requirement was that a broken or disconnected or shorted start signal circuit has to start the EPS. So those are 2 separate requirements. So what we did was we took the exact 2 sentences and we didn't modify it. We just put it within the requirements for the manual of style for how you write a 110 document, which is different than how we write the National Electrical Code. So I wish that was all the same, but it's not. So we had to make that modification. That made a couple people uneasy, but after we walked it through, I think they felt much more amenable to it. All right, so then the next thing we did another committee public input. All right, so that was PI. What number was that one? I got to record these. PI 16. PI 16. So then we had we had a committee input. We'll call this committee input 2. This one is going to need work for next draft. I'm telling you, we argued about this one for a long time, and quite frankly, what we came up with does not make sense. But it is a placeholder that we're going to have to fix later. What this referenced was in NFPA 70B, there is a concept of reliability-centered maintenance. And if you go to 70B, NFPA 70B, and in the current edition, which is still in the next edition, so you can go to NFPA link, which I know everybody out there has a subscription to. And if you scroll down to chapter, I think it's 30. Yes, chapter 30. Chapter 30 title is Reliability Centered Maintenance, RCM. Now what this is it's a process of supporting an enhanced maintenance program. Now, chapter 8 of 110 is titled Routine Maintenance and Operational Testing. I have some heartburn in regard to, we have 70B, which is for maintenance, and now we have 110, which has chapters and stuff in here on maintenance and operational testing. And I think 70B, which has provisions for things like reliability-centered maintenance and all that other jazz. I mean, someone needs to be looking at this relationship between 70B and 110. So, but having said that, and moving on, Chapter 8 is routine maintenance and operational testing. And what we did was we put an 8.1.3 in that says reliability-centered maintenance shall be permitted to be provided that complies with 8.1.1, which if you look at 8.1.1, there's nothing in there about reliability-centered maintenance. So, but at least we have the concept in the first draft. And in the second draft, we can expand upon it. There was discussion of why don't we just point to 70B, because 70B is much more comprehensive. But and we do cover, if you look at the structure of 70B, we cover batteries, we cover generators. I'm looking for the. Oh, you know what? I'm looking at the existing. So I have to got to look at the second draft. So let's take a look. Next edition. Go to next edition. Look at the view public comments, and you'll see the new structure. So you have uninterruptible power systems, which you already talked about, and there's maintenance on that. We have where's batteries? Battery energy storage systems. And I know we've got generators in here too. We should have generators in here. Substations and switchgear, transformers. I'm not finding, I'm not finding generators. I don't know why. Let's just look at the maintenance intervals real quick. Frequency of maintenance tables, that goes through a bunch of different things. I'm not sure what's, so we got busway, GFCIs, grounding, and we don't have generators in here. So maybe that is something that could be added. We have UPSs, we don't have. So I would argue, I would say, look, maybe there needs to be a task group between 70B and 110 that says, what should we be adding into maintenance? And if there's any provisions for emergency systems, we can reference 70B from 110 so that pulls in, and 70B is much more comprehensive in regard to what reliability-centered maintenance means is if I'm monitoring my equipment, I can modify my maintenance schedules because I know a lot more information about that equipment. And I could tell you maybe you don't have to do as frequent of maintenance on it, whatever those maintenance may be, or I may tell you you have to be more frequent because I'm monitoring and I have detailed information that says, hey, you know, this equipment is seeing higher temperatures, environmental temperatures, humidity, whatever it is that you're pulling together, you may modify your maintenance routines because you have more data. So we at least have the concept in 8.1.3, which is a committee input generating the 13th first revision. That's that one. And if I scroll down, the next one we get to is in 8.3.6.1. I'll delete all of this stuff. 8.3. Whoops, crap. Jeez, oh man. I gotta hold the wrong shift key. I have too many keyboards in front of me. So the next one is in 8.3.6.1. We changed storage batteries to level 1 EPS storage batteries. Simple change, right? So PI 20 is our 14th first revision. And then, and that was a simple change in 8.3.6.1. Then the next one is PI 19. And this would be 19 and 30, I believe we bucketed. 19 and PI 30. We bucketed both of those for our 15th first revision. Now this one here, there's 8.3.6.1.1, I think. I think it's 0.1. It's 83613. And then there's an 83611 and an 83612. What we did here was we added the concept of maintenance-free batteries and non-maintenance-free batteries. So we said for non-maintenance-free batteries, you have to do a monthly test and record the electrolyte, specific gravity, and other maintenance practices as required by the battery type, which in my opinion should be covered in 70B. But in any case. And then the second one, we said maintenance-free batteries have to include the monthly testing and documented of one of the following methods: battery conductance testing, ohmic testing, carbon pile load testing, and cranking voltage drop. So one of those 4 methods should be included. So there's going to be change in 8.3.6, and we're adding a 0.1 and a 0.2, two first, I can't call them first level subdivisions, 2 sections within that. And then we put annex material in for each of those. So we said when choosing the appropriate battery test, so we put annex material and a table to help people understand what those test methods are and when to pick them. We created a table, which I don't have here, but it's probably going to be put up in Terra shortly. I'm sure Chris Kowash is working his butt off tonight. All right, so that is what we did there, and we had to renumber the next one for defective batteries. So our next change, did I put that? So that's FR 15. That's our 15th first revision. And I would say that there's probably 2 because there's annex material. I'm just going to make that one. So when they finally come out with the count, because I'm lumping in the annex material, I'm going to call this 15 and 16. I'll put A for annex material. All right, so we scroll down, and then the next one we get to is 8.4, operational inspection and testing. 8.4.1, all we did there was add level 1 EPS in 8.4.1.1. Oh, and then, okay, so here's what we did here. This is PI 18. We'll call this our 17th first revision. So PI 18, we separated 8.4.1 into a level 1 and a level 2. Now remember, what's the title on 8.4? Operation, Inspection, and Testing. So in a level 1 EPS, you have to have all your aperture components inspected weekly, and the EPSS has to be exercised at least monthly. For a level 2, we said that the EPSs shall be visually inspected and exercised under load at time intervals not exceeding monthly. So at least monthly is what it should say. At least monthly. I think I wrote that. See, I almost went to the wrong keyboard at least monthly. All right. And that was that. That was PI 18, right? Yes. And then we had to renumber some things, so be mindful of that. Now we're into annex material. So we're out of the rules. 17 public, 17 first revisions. Now we're into annex material, and I already read Annex 4.1, which is PI 37. And I already got that. PI 37, we already talked about that right at the beginning. And if you want to know about that one, go back and scroll, go back. PI 26 is the next one. PI 26 is on Annex 4.4.1. And what do we do there? We added another list item, medical life-sustaining systems. So basically what Annex 4.4.1 is saying, that the essential electrical systems provide power for the following essential functions. And they have a list. And we just added medical life-sustaining systems. Piece of cake. Hard to argue against. The next two, we lumped two together. PI 25 and PI 27. That was 18. This is 19 first revisions. All right, so here's what we did here. And this is in Annex 442. A.4.4.2. And that's Annex Material 4, Section 4.4.2. Now, what we added was, we made a change. Remember, it said in item 4 on the list, it said sewage disposal. We had a person, my query on our panel, who says he does a lot of wastewater stuff. So he says, look, what we should say is water and wastewater treatment systems. So we changed sewage disposal to water and wastewater treatment systems. I think wastewater is one word. I wrote it as two. And it's not a capital W, not like Weight Watchers. All right, so then we added a little sentence that said standby generators used solely for telecommunications services that utilize battery backup in compliance with FCC guidelines are classified either level other than level 1 or 2, and they're outside of the scope of the standard. So we just clarified that if you have a standby generator that's solely for telecommunication services that utilizes battery backup and you're following FCC guidelines, you're out of the scope of this document. And I think this next one is the last one, which is PI 34. PI 34, and this would be first revision number 20. We said examples. A 5.1.1 is the section. The examples of probability of interruption could come from earthquakes, which is there. We added wind damage, and flood damage was there, and we added cybersecurity attacks. So we added wind and cybersecurity attacks to NFPA 110. So that's it. That's what we did in 110. We had I don't know exactly. We had 57 overall public inputs for both documents. And we took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22 minus 2 committee inputs. So 20 public inputs turned into 18 first revision. 2 committee inputs gave us 2 more first revisions. So we had 20 first revisions. 18 of them were driven by 20 public inputs. 2 of them were driven by 2 committee inputs. So that is 110. And 111, I'm telling you, is so short. We resolved most of what was in 111, most of the public inputs, and I'll tell you why. Time. We just ran up against the wall, and we had about an hour to do about 20-some public, or 15, or I don't know, somewhere around 20 public inputs, and there were some in there that just needed work, so we resolved them, gave the submitter enough information so they could come back in the second draft. But here's the changes. So public, so this is 111. PI number 6. In section 2.3.2, we just changed the date. We just changed the date of a UL standard. Piece of cake. That was PI 6. PI number 16. PI number 16, we added a definition for an energy storage system, and we just extracted that from 855. So, and the problem is that the submitter had broken the definition of an energy storage system down into a capacitor energy storage system, which we don't use that term. An electromechanical energy storage system, which I believe we do. A mechanical energy storage system, which we don't use. And energy storage systems. And then there was annex material. So we took the annex material, added that to the back. So we'll call that 1FR. And then we made another FR, which was adding the definition. And I believe it's just one definition. We'll have to see what it comes out with. So that was another FR, so that's 2. So that's 1, 2, 3 FRs driven by PI 16. And then we get back to the annex material, PI number 17, and that would be in Annex 1141, unit equipment refers to a self-contained, usually wall-mounted emergency lighting unit consisting of rechargeable battery, a battery charging means, integral or remote lamps, and controls that energize the lamps automatically upon failure of the normal power system. That is a new Annex 1.1.4.1, which, if you want to understand what it supports, you have to go to section 1141 and see what that text says. This annex material helps you understand that text. And that's it. So we took 3 public inputs and we generated 4 first revisions in 111. That was our week. That was yesterday and today, 2 full days. And like I said, we did 57 public inputs. And we did that in, was it 12 hours? So we did about 2.5 hours per public input. Today we didn't break for lunch, nor break for bio. It was a rough day. But we got through it, and we got done, which is beautiful. So that is 110 and 111. I know I had a question about what camera I was using yesterday, and I'll tell you that yesterday I was using my MacBook Pro. So in my MacBook Pro camera is a 1080p because it's a brand new computer. So yesterday with the black background, I could do that here as well. I could just simply do that and have a black background. But I was on my other one. Now the camera that I'm using here is a 1080p Logitech. It's a 940, 950. I'm not sure. So I just wanted to at least answer that question. I can't remember who asked it, but now it is answered. All right. So that is NFPA 110 and 111 in a nutshell. And we got done. All right, so you have the skinny on. Now what you can do is, here's what will happen next. We will get our ballots. So Chris Koash and the NFPA crew will do their voodoo that they do so well. And they will send out the ballots. I'm not sure when those will go out. They'll send out the ballots. We will vote, they will recirculate, we can change our vote, and then it'll be locked in and it will be published as a first revision. Then you'll be able to go out and see all the stuff that I just told you, which again might change from what I said. I may have missed something. I'm just going off of my notes. I believe my notes are pretty complete, but you never know what I'm going to miss. I got you in the ballpark. That's sort of what's going on. there will be task group work between the first revision and the second draft meetings, hopefully, crossing my fingers. One of those task groups is going to be on this concept of reliability-centered maintenance. Another task group, hopefully, is going to be on microgrids and how do we infiltrate? How do we put some requirements in 110 around microgrids? The other thing are the energy management system, which is a permitted, but hopefully we'll have a task group to look at what should be the public comments for performance requirements on the energy management system. And just like what should be the performance requirements on a microgrid. That's those were the two, and I believe there were a couple other items in there too from a suggested task group work. Oh yeah, so I believe that is where. Oh, and then UL. There were a bunch of public inputs from UL that need to be looked at. Oh yes, Ben, I will look at my. I'm going to go upstairs. I'm going to wind down, and I'll take a look at your email. So I will look at that. Thank you. I'm pretty much done right now. So that's all I needed to say. I believe I just want to at least let you know. First draft is done on 110 and 111. Thank God, and we're ready for public comments. Second draft. Alrighty, so that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for everything that you guys and gals do out there for electrical safety and the electrical industry. Remember to stay safe and please stay healthy. Talk to you later.